Well, hey there, and welcome back to the Midwest Basement, where we celebrate Midwest taste in a classic Midwest environment. Welcome to December, folks. I don't know about where you live, but in Wisconsin we have already had feels like negative temperatures and snow. Hell, I've already unpacked my ultra warm puffer coat. That's so long it makes me feel a little bit like a sausage. That being said, this month not only are we celebrating all the holidays, but also the start of cold and dark season. And do you know what helps with that? Booze. So let's talk about beer. This month we are drinking 4 Stars by the Funk Factory Geuzaria. This is a very peculiar beer, which I'm really excited to try. This beer is a blend of a 4-year spontaneous beer and a 2-year foeder fermented sour beer. Then the whole thing was aged on Montmorency cherries. I'm sure some of you sour fans out there already know all of this, but let's go over some of these definitions just in case. A spontaneous beer is when the brewer allows a batch of wort to just sit open air and use wild yeast and bacteria that just kind of happen to be floating in the air to collect on the wort. That is then used to start the fermentation process, and that's the bacteria and yeast that the beer ferments with. This leads to really interesting, weird, and funky flavors that just can't be replicated with standard brewer's yeast. Usually they come across with lots of acidity and tartness, with a little bit of fruit flavors and plenty of funk. So next, what does foeder fermented mean? Or foeder fermented? I've seen it kind of spelled out both ways. A foeder is, simply explained, really just a really big barrel, around 600 liters, which is 160 gallons. Since they're so big, there is a bigger beer to wood ratio, and this allows the beer to mature and rest at a different pace, resulting in pretty different flavors. It also means less oxygen gets in contact with the beer, which means less oxidation and fuller, rounder flavor. So when we put these two things together and add cherries, we get this beer. Seems as though it's gone through quite a bit. And it's from the Funk Factory Geuzaria. Now, it's a really interesting time for this brewery, actually, as it just sold its location and its equipment to one of its long-term employees, Kyle Metz, and will be changing its name to Black Rose Blending Company. Funk Factory has been open since 2015 and is known for, well, as the name might suggest, lambic style or sour beers. Apparently, these beers will continue to be made and sold under the new owner and under the name Funk Factory still. So if we fall in love with this one, we're probably going to be able to find something similar still. So with that, let's crack her and see what we think, yeah? Got a little bit of a hiss there. Woo! I can already smell that all the way from over here. That smells sour, and I am excited. Well, it's definitely got that beautiful pale cherry color to it that you see in a lot of fruit wines or beers with cherry in them. It's a beautiful color, definitely a little carbonation, got some bubbles going on there, and not a lot of head, if at all. It just kind of smells tart to me. I am excited for this. Woo! Yep. If you are a lambic fan, if you are a sour fan, and you live around Madison, why have you not gone to Funk Factory? Or purchased some of their stuff? That went right to the back of my mouth, exactly where you would expect a sour beer to land. That is extremely tasty. And honestly, it tastes like a very quintessential spontaneous beer, or wild beer as they're also known. I am a huge fan of wild beers. I think that really specific taste and kind of hit of weird funky sour that you get from them, it's just, you can't really find that anywhere else, and it's really fun. This is definitely sour, it's definitely tart, so if you don't like to make that face, maybe move on to the next one that might be a little bit sweeter. I will say that the cherries don't tame it down a lot. Sometimes I feel like fruited sours come across a little bit more sweet than they do sour. This one is not the case. It has, I would say, a little bit of a cherry twist at the end, but that cherry flavor is not the dominant one. I would say the spontaneous beer, that is the dominant flavor there. It's just so particular. It's delicious. It's delicious. Now that our palate is a little bit shocked and ruined by the amazing spontaneity of that, let's move on to our wine, shall we? This month, we are drinking the Uplands Reserve by Botham Vineyards. This is a dry red blend aged in oak barrels. Botham says this is entirely representative of the Marchal-Faux grape varietal. Now, Marchal-Faux is actually a French hybrid that happens to do really well in colder climates, so you'll often see this in Midwestern wines. This is going to be earthy with significant fruit behind it. And if I were to guess, I would probably say maybe like a little bit of vanilla and a tiny bit of sweetness from being in those oak barrels. All the grapes for this were grown on the estate at Botham, which means that this is a 100% Iowa County, Wisconsin wine, which is where Botham is located. The owners of Botham have actually been making wine and growing grapes on that property since 1989. Now, they grow the red grape varietals there, and they're all French hybrid varietals because, like I said, those are cold climate friendly. They actually ship the white varietals in from the Finger Lakes region of New York because they just weren't happy with the quality of cold climate white grape varietals that they were able to grow on the site. So I guess we know that they have a very high standard for what they're willing to bottle and serve us. Now, interestingly, this was actually named Wisconsin's Best Wine by Epicurious.com last year. So I'm really excited to give her a try. And I guess let's pop her and see what we think. Ooh, really, really small, quiet pop there. We've got a really dark wine stain here, and it smells good. That is more classic red than I guess I thought it was gonna be. Now, what I have learned recently is that the more red and orangish the tint of a wine is, the more acidity can be found in it. So deep purple and plumish type wines are gonna have low acidity, and reddish, orangish, burnished wines are going to have a higher acidity. That being said, taking a look at this, I guess I would say it's gonna be a little acidic, given that kind of like on the rim here, it's a little red, it's a little orange and then kind of fades to a dark red. It smells like fruit. I think it kind of smells like raspberries, maybe a little bit of cherry. It has a little bit of that, what's the word I'm looking for? Flinty, wet, stone-ish smell that I kind of associate with Wisconsin grown reds, honestly. That is a lot smoother than what I was expecting. It's so smooth. It's a really smooth, gentle ride, and I'm pretty sure that is from the oak aging. It definitely has a little bit of that stone, like wet stone quality that I was talking to, and it definitely is like packed with full of, I would say like juicy, ripe red fruits. So cherries, raspberries, maybe a little bit of strawberry even. It is a really drinkable red, and I have to check what the ABV is because to me the mouthfeel is a little thin, which means I bet that this is not above 12%, but let's take a look. 12.2%. Cheers, Molly. This one is definitely a little bit brighter, a little bit less heavy in the mouth, which is really nice. It makes it really drinkable. With the fruits and kind of the mellowness of the barrel, I mean, I can see why this won an award. This would be just a great bottle of wine to hand someone as a housewarming gift or at a girls' night to say, you know what, we're gonna drink local tonight. And there's really nothing to dislike about this wine. Cheers to Botham. This is a very quaffable red wine. All right, one more, then we go, folks. Lastly, this month for our spirit, we had to go with a Wisconsin classic and pick a brandy. So this month, we are drinking North Wisconsin Brandy by Central Standard Craft Distillery. North Brandy is aged for 2+ years in fire-toasted barrels and then finished in bourbon barrels. The Central Standard team says this allows the brandy to just kind of relax and mellow a little bit. So it ends with a sweetness and a smoothness. North is actually the very first brandy ever produced by a Milwaukee-based company, as Central Standard is located on Clybourne Street in the city of Milwaukee. And as such, this brandy was actually named the official brandy of Miller Park in 2020, and thus is served at the park during brewer games. The distillery, opened by two friends, Evan and Pat, is named Central Standard after, well, you guessed it, Central Standard Time Zone, which, as the story goes, is the only thing the two friends shared before starting the business together. Now, I have heard this is great in a classic and old school Wisconsin sweet or sour old fashioned, but let's crack her and see what these flavors are like all on our own. I am always looking for a good Wisconsin-made brandy because as much as I love Korbel, because I am a Wisconsinite, it is produced in California, so I would love to go a little more local than that. Ooh, nice pop. She pours lighter than I thought she was going to. Now, that's a little bit more yellow than darker caramel or even slightly ambery. And I think this is maybe because they don't actually give a time for how long it's rested in aged bourbon barrels. So I'm gonna guess it's probably not too long, and most of that color is probably coming from the toasted barrels. Smells lighter and I think maybe sweeter than I was expecting. Smells like the basis for a good old fashioned. Oh, okay. I would say it is definitely a little bit sweeter, maybe a little bit vanilla, and warming spices from that bourbon up front, and then on the back end it gives a little bit of an alcohol bite, which I think is actually great to use for a mixing brandy in an old fashioned, because let's be honest, you don't want those old fashions to be too smooth, because then you might have a lot of them. And also, you're using a mixer in those old school Wisconsin old fashions, either lemon lime or squirt. So you're gonna want something that will hold its own a little bit so that you know you're drinking brandy. It's definitely very warming in my chest. I would say I am very excited to put this in some classic cocktails this holiday season. I think it will hold up great in an old fashioned. And you know what? I bet it would hold up great in some December holiday themed cocktails too. I can see this going really well with some cinnamon sticks, maybe a little orange and cranberry. I think this is gonna be a great cocktail find. Alrighty folks. Well, I suppose that's it for us down here in the Midwest basement, and that's it for 2023. Have a great December, folks. Say hi to your folks for me and watch for deer, okay? Yeah, bye. Cheers.